Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us in the next of our definition series webinars that we've got going on. My name is Jason Funderburg. I'm going to be moderating and asking some of the questions today. I'm joined by the entire tournament department. Chris Roselle and Neil Gilman are going to help answer some questions in the questions section. And today's presenter is going to be Kirby Martin. Before I pass it over to Kirby, I want to remind everyone that today's webinar is being recorded and will be posted to the GAP website at gapgolf.org/gap-webinars. Another quick reminder to ask questions. We encourage any questions from all, and we'll do our best to get to those today or respond to you after the fact. And just an alert, a little bit of a shorter presentation today, so if you do have a question, be sure to get that in early so that we can be sure to cover it. Without further ado, Kirby, I'm going to pass it over to you. Thanks for joining us today and presenting.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for getting us started, and welcome everybody to our section on those who play the game, otherwise known as people on the course. So we'll get into what that means here. People on the course, we've got definitions for player, caddy, opponent, marker, partner, side, committee, referee, and outside influence. These are important. For example, if you go to rule number 9, which is about the ball played as it lies, ball rest, lifted, or moved. Some of the items covered in there is, a ball moved by, lifted, or moved by a player, a ball lifted or moved by an opponent, a ball moved by an outside influence. So when we read that rule about a ball being moved, it's hard to understand unless we know exactly these definitions about people on the course. The player is not defined in the rules of golf. It's used in both match play and stroke play rules, and it refers to any golfer and includes an opponent, a partner, and the members of a side. And we'll get into a little bit more on the members of the side here shortly. But here in the photo, we've got Bubba, Phil, and Tiger. They are all players. So moving on to the next slide. A caddy is someone who helps a player during a round, including in these ways: carrying, transporting, or handling clubs. A person who carries, transports, such as by a cart or trolley, or handles a player's clubs during play is the player's caddy, even if not named as a caddy by the player. So I don't know if many of you know, but the rules do state that we are only allowed to have one caddy at a time. And we can hire or fire a caddy at any time. We just can't have two. So a few years ago at the Philadelphia Open at Marion, we had a player who had a caddy, and that caddy on the 17th hole, instead of continuing with his player to the green, stayed at the top of the hill and waited for the player to finish 17 and then hit his tee shot. His significant other carried clubs for the player down to the green. Not all of the clubs, but some of the clubs. And at that point, the player had two caddies, as defined by caddy, by the term here, caddy. A player is someone who handles a player's clubs during play. And that was not a fun conversation to have with that player, but that's a very important defined term there. It's somebody that carries the player's clubs. So it's a player's caddy, except one done to move the player's clubs, a bag, or a cart out of the way as a courtesy, or as an example, such as getting a club the player left behind. So let's imagine that you left your 7-iron on the 9th green. In the middle of 10, you figured that out, and you asked a spectator or somebody to go back and grab that club for you. That's not a caddy. or if you move a player's clubs, you're not acting as a courtesy. You're not acting as a caddy in that situation, or to move a cart out of the way. So those are the exceptions to the definition. The exceptions in the rules make the rules difficult to understand, but if you think about it, they're just trying to clarify in a lot of different situations what those terms mean, so that when a player has his bag moved by somebody as a courtesy, somebody doesn't say, hey, that's having two caddies. So a player's caddy is the only person other than a partner or a partner's caddy that a player may ask for advice. So here we have this photo on the right. This player is asking advice from his caddy, and that's okay as defined by the term caddy. (10.3b) covers the other things that a caddy may do, such as maybe mark the ball on the putting green, which is new to the rules in 2019. Previously, they were not permitted to do that, but there's other things there in the rules covered by 10.3b that a caddy can do. Any questions on caddy?
Hey, Gerb, got one for you. What is the penalty for having the second caddy as the example is given?
Well, it was 2 strokes. It's the general penalty in the rules. So the penalty scale in the rules is kind of, 1 stroke, 2 strokes, and disqualification depending on the severity of the breach. Generally speaking, when we talk about 1-stroke penalties, those are kinds of procedural items. And the next step up is the 2-stroke penalty, or the general penalty. That's 2 strokes or loss of hole in match play. And those are more significant breaches. And then disqualification obviously is the highest level breach, and just things that can't happen. And if they do happen, you're going to head to the car. Okay. Opponent is the person a player competes against in a match. The term opponent only applies in match play. So when we hear the word opponent, that we have to instantly assume it's a match, right? We don't have opponents in stroke play. Marker. In stroke play, it's the person responsible for entering the player's score on a scorecard and for certifying that scorecard. So, in match play, we don't have markers. We're not required to keep score. It might be suggested that you keep score so you know the status of your match. But at the end of the day, you don't have to have a scorecard certified by a marker. The players come to the scoreboard and they say, Kirby beat Chris 3-2. And that's how it's certified. I don't beat Chris very often, but I'm pretty proud when I do. So it's this, marker's a stroke play term, and it's for certifying. That's the person certifying the score at the end of the round. The marker may be another player, but not a partner. The committee may identify who will be the player's marker, or tell the players how they may choose a marker. So, I think in USGA events, they have you have a list of the starters you have a list of the players. The player A may receive player C's scorecard. Player B may receive player A's, and so on. They have a specific way that they choose who is the marker for each player. So That's one of the things the committee can do. They can require who is the player's marker, or they can tell the players how they may choose a marker. Any questions on marker?
Nothing so far on marker yet, but did have a question, Kirby, if someone can ride along with you and still not be considered a caddy while you're playing your round, but isn't a partner.
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends on the rules for the event. Sometimes, spectators aren't permitted in the carts, but that other person, if they're not performing the acts of a caddy, would be deemed a spectator or an outside agency.
Perfect. I think that's it for now, but I'll let you know if we have any come up.
Okay. Now we're going to move on to the term partner. It's a player who competes together with another player as a side in either match play or stroke play. So here we have a picture of a Curtis Cup scoreboard. On the left, Hudson and Duggleby are part of that's a side, and they are partners to one another in that Curtis Cup match against, it looks like I've got something in the way here, Duncan and German. The side is two or more partners competing as a single unit in around in match play or stroke play. Each set of partners is a side, whether each partner plays his own ball or the partners play one ball. So an example of each player playing their own ball would be four ball, or better, another way to term four ball is better ball of partners. For most of you, you'll understand that a little bit better than four ball. And foursomes is the kind of alternate shot format. So you could play one ball in foursomes, or you could play your own ball in four ball. And the side is not the same as a team. In a team competition, each team consists of players competing as individuals or as sides. So team competition might be a little bit more easy to understand in maybe high school golf. When you're playing for your high school team, that team consists of players playing as individuals. You could also have a team competition where the players play as sides.
Hey, Kirby, got one question going back to marker here, if you got a sec.
Sure.
Someone asked, as a marker, I signed my name to the scorecard on the 10th tee. The competitor I was marking for said I could not sign until the end of the round. Was he correct?
Well, let's think about what we're doing when we're signing a scorecard as the marker. We're verifying that what we've put down is correct. And if we sign the scorecard on the 10th tee, that may be okay if some other player is leaving from our threesome, right? We might verify that what we've written down on that scorecard is correct for the front nine, and then give that scorecard for somebody else to mark the back nine, if it's an 18-hole stipulated round. But in all honesty, if we're playing 18 holes and we have the same person's score for 18 holes, if we're keeping score for the same person, we're the marker for that person for the 18 holes, we really don't want to sign until all the scores are correct and we both have an understanding that what was written down there is correct. That's our responsibility to the field. In stroke play, we want to protect the rest of the field, and that's our responsibility. So I'm not going to say that it's right or wrong, but I would just say that that's what you're doing, and you probably should not do that.
Got another question here that just flowed in about team play. When is advice to each other okay, and when is it not okay in a team event?
So I think that might be referring to a situation like it's a little bit hard to say, to a situation like the team matches where we have a 4-ball and an individual match going on at the same time. That was cleared up in 2019, that if we are partners at the beginning of the match, we are partners until the end. And I can provide advice to my partner if I'm correct, Chris. If I'm incorrect, fix me on this, but I can provide advice to my partner until the 18th hole or until the match is over.
That's correct, Herb.
Anything else there, Jason?
Nope, I think we're good to move on.
Committee, we've referred to this term quite a bit in the previous definitions, and now we're going to define it. Okay, it's the person or group in charge of the competition. And if we go to section 1 of the rules, we'll find an area that defines all the things that the committee does. Sometimes at your club, the committee might be one person, like the golf professional, or it could be a group. It could be the superintendent combined with the golf professional and your golf board, right? The group that directs all the competitions at the course and sets up when club championship is going to be and how we're going to run that. So it could be, again, one person or a group. So here's this term for referee. It's an official named by the committee to decide questions of fact and apply the rules. And in the committee procedures in section 6C, we can see a little area explaining all the responsibilities and authority of a referee. We can have a referee in stroke play, and we can have a referee in match play. We have a referee in match play. That person is accompanying the group and deciding any questions of fact and applying the rules. So the players in that situation wouldn't necessarily need to make a request for a ruling because the referee would be there to do it. It doesn't mean that they can't make a request for a ruling. That referee may be accompanying that match, and there may be just something that he didn't see. And that player can then go and request a ruling from the referee based on what occurred and the facts of the situation. But that's their job. That's why the referee accompanies the match, to ensure that the rules are upheld and that the match is played in a sporting fashion. So this might be our biggest definition to kind of understand. It's 5 slides long. The other definitions we've seen so far today have been fairly short, although Caddy is somewhat difficult in its definition because that was a couple of slides. But outside influence is a very big key definition to understand. And it's any of these people or things that can affect what happens to a player's ball or equipment or to the course. So we have Tiger Woods here on in the slide. He's the player. All of these other things here, including the spectators and Phil and Bubba, are an outside influence in stroke play to Tiger. Except, and here's this exception again, we're getting complicated, right? The exceptions make things complicated. The player or his or her caddy, or the player's partner or opponent, or any of these caddies. So in the slide here on the top, we have a partner and the partner's caddy. We have the player and her caddy. Those are not outside influences in that situation. On the bottom, we have a player and an opponent, and they are not outside influences. Any animal is an outside influence, and any natural object or artificial object or anything else, including another ball in motion. So here in the top slide, we have some leaves blowing around on the putting green. Those are an outside influence. In the second slide, we've got, looks like maybe an area where there's drinking water. That's an outside influence. The ball washer and the trash cans are outside influences. And this ball in motion hit by this player here that we see in the slide, you can barely see it in that center stripe. That's a outside influence. I wanted to bounce back to the animal slide here just a bit previously. So if an animal is an outside influence, and this dog, it states right here in the definition that he's an outside influence, what happens if that dog runs out and picks up a player's ball? Does anybody have the answer to that question? And again, here we go with another exception. Natural forces such as wind, water, or when something happens for no apparent reason because of the effects of gravity, those are not outside influence. Wind, water, rain, or something happens because of the effects of gravity, that's natural forces, and they are not outside influences. Jason, that's the end of our slideshow today. Is there any other questions that we can cover before we wrap things up?
Yeah, we got a couple flowing in here, a couple responses to your question actually as well. What happens if a putt is struck and then a leaf is blown onto the green and deflects the ball?
If I remember correctly, Chris, maybe you can help me out on this if I'm wrong, but that is a replay.
Yes, that is correct.
So what we would do is we would go back and place the ball on its original location. If we don't know that exact location, we're going to estimate that spot and play again.
Mm-hmm.
Got another one here.
But that's really only on the putting green.
Correct.
Right.
If our ball was in the air, played from the general area, and it hits a leaf, that's not a replay. We're going to play the ball where it comes to rest.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. All right. When the team event is only individual stroke play, is advice between teammates allowed, or is it only when a concurrent four ball is being played?
So only when you're playing in a concurrent 4-ball. The individuals on a team for like high school golf are playing an individual stroke play, even though they're part of a team. And we're bound by the rules of individual stroke play, which means we can't give each other advice. Now, there are times like in college golf where you would be playing an individual stroke play that the committee can name somebody a captain or which might be a coach who is allowed to give advice to the players, but that's really the only other time that can happen.
That's correct, Herb, and that has to be spelled out in the conditions of the competition.
Correct.
Got a follow up to that putt question of whether you have to replay the ball after a leaf hits it.
It is a must replay.
And got some people clamoring for the answer to the dog question, Kirby, if you wouldn't mind providing that to the group.
Okay, because our ball was moved by a dog, if we can't readily retrieve it, we can substitute a ball, and we just simply place that ball as near as possible to where it laid when it was moved. Sometimes that might be more easy than not, depending on our location when the dog moved the ball, but we're going to estimate the spot and replace it.
And looks like one last question here along those lines. What if you hit a bird, a la, I guess, Randy Johnson making that pitch a few years ago?
So we hit a bird, we played from the general area, okay? And our ball strikes a bird, it's going to be just like when we hit a leaf, and that's a no replay. It's going to be play the ball where it comes to rest. Many of you may have seen a video on the putting green of a bird at I think it was TPC Sawgrass, picking up a ball and carrying it over and flying away with it, and then actually dropping the ball into the water. But on the putting green, obviously we can, if we can't readily retrieve the ball, just like the dog, we can replace that ball and put it back to where, as near as possible to where we thought it was.
All right, great. Well, looks like our questions have run up here. Just a reminder, if you guys do have any additional questions, please feel free to send them along to us personally, or you can join us tomorrow for our next in the series of webinars. Want to thank everybody for joining us today. Want to thank Kirby, Chris, and Neil as well for helping out. Just a reminder again, today's webinar was recorded and will be available later today at gapgolf.org/gap-webinars. Kirby, thanks again for taking the time out of your day to present with us, and hope everyone has a good one.